Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're joined by a special guest. You know them, you love them. Today we have Tony.
Yeah, Tony!
Hello, boys.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's just gone 9 a.m. here in Sydney, and I haven't had coffee, but my mood is quite okay considering there's no coffee in my system yet.
My God, I'm very proud of you. As a fellow Australian, I can confirm coffee, especially good coffee, is the lifeblood of every sensible Australian. And I'm quite proud of you for soldiering on this morning. It's actually quite late here in the UK. It's quite late in the evening, about 10:20 p.m. And I think it's about mid-afternoon where you are, Tim. Is that right?
No, it's early evening. It's about 5:30.
Okay.
PM.
Well, we've still got quite the international spread of persons on our little podcast episode today, which is quite fun. And a little bit of a spread of age as well. So, Tony, can you, just for the listeners, tell us, how old are you, dear?
I'm 62, so I was a late 50s baby, born in 1959.
So, because you and I have been friends for a little bit now, you know, we've got the chance to be social in person. And I find it very, very curious because obviously for me and people of my generation, I obviously see quite a few people, in fact, the majority of people in my age bracket who seem to make up the community. There's no shortage of people in my vintage, shall we say, who are either on the gaining side of things or the encouraging, feeding side of things. But I don't think it's an unfair statement to say that as you sort of look through membership on Grommr and different gainer community profiles, as you skew older, the number of persons who seem actively engaged lessen over time. I'm kind of curious to know, what was the community like when you first joined, and what year was that?
Well, breaking that down a bit, I think you're absolutely right. There's less older people. And I just think part of that is as you get older, you're less interested engaging in hookup apps and social media and dating, online sites and so on. You're kind of more settled into your social life and your partner, and you're not seeking as much, I guess, as you get older. Right. And you've kind of done it too, you know, you've ticked the box. So if I compare how much I am on Grommr now to what I would have been when I first got on, it's a lot less. And it's not that anything's wrong, it's just that I did it a lot.
I think it's really interesting to kind of have that switch in perspective, because this is something that Tim and I often discuss because, you know, in lieu of there being anyone else to make age jokes at, Tim bears the brunt of them, of course, and that's always good fun to sort of poke at him for, because he looks so youthful and delicious. So I take great pleasure in being like, no. But it's this interesting conversation on what your community expectations are like and what you kind of get out of people when interacting and engaging, especially because a lot of people who are even younger than myself, people who are in their early 20s, they tend to be the ones who have on their profile, nobody over 30, nobody old enough to be my dad, don't even talk to me, don't even try it. And I get it, for a bit of cock or a bit of sex, fair enough. Maybe you're not too interested in people who are substantially older than you. But with regards to community and friendship, you know, I find that kind of willing block very interesting. So, yeah.
You know what kind of bugs me about that, though? Because, James, you said that, like, there are a bunch of people who are right on their profiles, nobody over the age of 30 or, you know, yada, yada, whatever their preferences are. Like, I get that, but I mean, boy, are you really discounting a great demographic, because I have had plenty of sexual relations with men who were sometimes 20, not quite at 30 years my senior, but at least within 20 years my senior. And I prefer men who know what the fuck they're doing. And older men, they're just older people who have had plenty of sexual experiences often know what they're doing, what they want. You don't have to mess around with all of the unnecessary BS. Sometimes you can even cut out the whole seducing and just be like, hey, you want to get right to it. I don't know why they wipe out a whole demographic like that.
Well, I think it's just comes down to attraction, really. And I understand that. We're attracted to who we're attracted to. And within our strange and weird and wonderful gaining world, we've got our specifics of attraction for sure. And that can include age, which is fine. But I find that, say I leave a message for someone saying, congrats on your gains, great belly, nothing sexual, just a very, like a one sentence, admiration, say. One of two things will happen is that it just doesn't get a reply, which is fine. That's kind of normal on social media. And I've noticed the younger guys that are not into me sexually, but will reply, they're just more confident, they're more free spirits, they're up for a little chat. And it's quite clear that they're not sexually attracted to me, but they don't care. And so I think it's those two things. They're more a free spirit, they have a more international mentality, and they've got an inner confidence.
Yeah. I
think too that the older you get, the less the age gap matters to you. Like if I were 21, I might be like, well, somebody who's 50, like there's 30 years, almost 30 years between us, and maybe we wouldn't have anything in common or whatever. But now here at almost 40, I guess feasibly a soft cutoff date would be 70.
Yeah, and I think, and it's fine. It's totally fine. I don't ever get offended by someone not being interested in me because of my age. I think when I was 21, I probably wouldn't have been interested in me now.
That's understandable. And Tony, this is something I've come to know about you, getting to spend time getting to know about you. You're a very salt of the earth type of person. You're a very shoot from the hip, but also grounded. You don't seem to let a lot bother you. And it's quite marvelous to engage with someone who has a lot of that, because you kind of do get that sense of, oh, well, I can be free to kind of cock up around this person a little bit more. I can let my hair down a little bit more. I can be a bit more free speaking and have the confidence that this is all going to be treated, in the realm that it needs to be treated in, with a bit more, understanding, rather than I think sometimes with people who are a bit younger, sometimes it's very like, oh, you said the wrong thing, one wrong way, one time, that's it, you're done, cut, cancelled, end of it all.
I think that is something that has happened, that used to happen less, for sure. And I guess that's a whole other conversation, isn't it? Cancel culture and everything. But that does tend to happen more than it used to. And I just think, it's better in life to go through just water off a duck's back, just shrug things off, because, there are children starving in the world. Well, you've got to get things in perspective.
How long have you been a part of the community for, and what was it like when you first joined?
Well, going back a couple of steps from that, it would have been the mid-90s. So right from when I was a little kid, let's go back even further.
Go to it, girl.
When I was a little kid, I was the typical secretive, stuffing pillows up my shirt, wanting to be fat. So it's typical of so many stories. And growing up as a teenager, I would see fat men with, big beer bellies and go, oh, he's hot, secretively. Anyway, I kept that to myself. I didn't share those thoughts with anybody. Cut to the mid-90s, and I was with my then civilian long-term partner, and we were in the States for the first time, and we're in San Francisco in a gay bookshop, and I discovered a magazine, because everything, there was no online then, and I discovered, or very little online, a magazine called Big Ad. And it was basically a chub chaser magazine. And I couldn't believe it. Right at that moment, I thought, oh my God, I am not the only person in the world attracted to fat people. It was quite a moment, because I was in my mid-30s by then, so I'd held the secret. And I think that's probably one of the big differences, is that the older generations had to be more secretive about their gay life and all the details of that.
Interesting. So there's almost this moment here. In fact, not even almost, there is this moment where many of us, and I am very much included in that, people of my vintage especially, and also younger, where we forget it wasn't so long ago that to be gay was not an okay thing, was something that was very much not okay, and that to conduct yourself as a queer person and to operate as such came with a lot of secrecy and a lot of needing to hide and to be protective and secretive. So when we ask this question of, what was the community like in a certain era, in a certain decade, it makes sense that for the most part, it was very small and very secretive, because it was still in the midst of all of those bits and pieces happening. And I think you were saying this is like the mid-80s, mid-90s. Is that right?
Yeah. And, gay pride started in late 70s, on the international level. But I remember when I graduated from uni, I did a music education degree. There was no way, and this is 1981, there was no way you could be out and get a teaching position. No way. You wouldn't get a job. Your sexuality had to be a complete secret. So, it is a very different world. And I guess, for those people that are interested in gay history, if you go back even further, the gay icons like Quentin Crisp, for instance, who was a famous gay man, and there was a movie called The Naked Civil Servant about his life, and how—
It's a really good movie.
Yes, and how secretive they had to be, and also how much physical abuse, how much gay bashing there was. So yeah, it was a very different time, and thank goodness there's been so much progress in that way. And so you can imagine, layered on top of a certain amount of secrecy you had to have as a gay man, then another layer of gaining culture. It was very secretive. The first real online site that I got into was Belly Builders. And that was, I think Anthony in Melbourne, he established it in the early 90s. And, there wasn't chat on the sites in those days, but there were chat rooms, and you could connect up with people in a much more awkward way. But that was great. That opened up a whole new world to us.
It is just fascinating, that reflection on just how recent a lot of these things are. I don't think it was too long ago that Matthew Shepard hit an anniversary, didn't it? It was about 30 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm 29. And I think it's so important that, again, we contextualize where we're at now versus where we've come from, both in a gaining sense in what we have for a community, but also queerness in general. So, Tony, what are some of the biggest changes you've noticed in the community since when you joined? And is there something from those older days that you miss nowadays?
Yeah, I think with every bit of progress we have, there's also a price. when I was a kid, for instance, you would, if a lady got on a bus, you would stand up for her so she could sit down. She walked into a room when I was a kid, you would have to stand up. You would open a door for her. But there wasn't the equality that women have now. You know, there wasn't the equality of opportunity in careers and so forth back then, when I was a kid in the 60s for women. So I always think there's been so much progress for women and the gay community and so on, but there's also sometimes there's a price that comes with progress. And so I'd say it's all improved for the better, definitely, no question, because of what we were talking about, you know, that you don't have to be so secretive. But I guess probably the biggest change really is social media. That is the biggest change in our lives. And out of that, a symptom of that is paid platforms, I would say, have changed the tone of websites and chat.
That's certainly an ongoing conversation that's had frequently among a lot of people of, I think, every age. I think you can easily reflect on the YouTube days when you could have gotten anything you wanted, gainer content-wise, for free. Snap of the fingers. But now, of course, the only place you really seem to get good content is on someone's paid service. But then, who's producing good paid service? And when you consider what you pay money for, what constitutes as something worth paying money for? And it brings up a lot of questions. Tim, I'm keen to refer to you for this. You know, we touched on this a little bit. What has that experience been like for you? When you first joined, what was the community like, and what do you think has been the biggest change since then?
Well, we didn't have the internet until I was a senior in high school. So that would have been 2000, or maybe we had it in 99. But, you know, so it was really the dawn of the new millennium that the internet came into my life. And, you know, prior to that, I basically just had to use my imagination, because sure, there were movies, cartoons, other things that I could have referenced and, you know, had a wank to that stuff. But, you know, when I went online, I was specifically trying to find, like, I would type in, like, okay, fat guy porn or big belly porn. And I didn't actually get to a gainer website that way. I got to this porn company, I think it was called PR Simon Productions, and they only did chub porn. But then back when web rings were a thing and you could visit many different websites through a web ring, somehow I landed on the old Belly Builders website, and a whole new world opened. And I was like, again, like Tony was saying, oh my God, I'm not alone. Someone else is into this. Belly Builders led me to Gainer Web. Gainer Web eventually gave way to Beefy Frat, which is my personal favorite website that's ever come and gone.
Beefy Frat, that was our first one, yeah. So
that was a really good website. In the beginning, it fell apart because it was a one-man show and it just couldn't be sustained. But so the way that it's changed is like Tony said, the advent of social media. Prior to that, we just only had dedicated websites or Yahoo groups or many of the many things. Yeah.
That was my first introduction. So I will disclose here, I was 12. Said I was 18, didn't I?
Well, we all did that.
I was 18
the first illegal thing you've done in your life. There've been many since.
Many illegal things since. But no, I was 18 for a good 6-7 years of my life, according to the internet. But Yahoo Groups was very much my introduction. I actually remember this. I typed into Google the phrase "teens who want to be fat," and that brought up Yahoo Groups. It did. Because, you know, like when well, maybe you don't know, when I was a kid and learning how to use the internet and everything, Mum basically said, Google is like the magic genie. You just have to tell it what you want and it'll bring it up for you. So when I'm thinking, because I knew at 12, it wasn't just I wanted fat men. I knew in my little 12-year-old brain that me, the human, wanted to become fat. So therefore, I searched for it and I found it. So it was Yahoo groups. I remember there was one specifically for a guy called Josh Grayson who was on a season of American Idol. He was a country singer that got really fucking fat. And there were all these like photos of him on tour, like bent over, singing into the mic in a bursting button-down shirt. Warren Davis, I got introduced to his art that way, and it was through clicking the links of the artwork that took me to GainaWeb. So it's always fun, I think, to reflect on those days. I've always thought maybe I should, do they call it the Wayback Machine?
Yeah, you can still find some of that stuff on the Wayback Machine.
I've been curious. Maybe I should have a gander on the Wayback Machine and see, and just revisit GainaWeb, just to see what it all looks like. But Tony, I do want to ask, just in your experience, and we've talked about this a little bit, but do you feel that there is a disconnect between members of the community of your vintage and younger?
No, I don't think there's a total disconnect. I think it's what we were talking about earlier. It's just who you're attracted to.
Yeah.
And so if you're not attracted to someone outside a certain age range, then that's that.
It's just not happening.
Yeah, I don't think there's a massive intentional disconnect. I just think it's an attraction thing.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is not to do with age really, I do think the paid platforms, for instance, the other day I discovered he was a straight guy actually, a gainer, and I saw his comparison shot and he was skinny. And then obviously next to that, there is a photo of him fat. And there's nothing I love more than a comparison shot.
Oh, yes.
So I got onto his Tumblr page and I went from the beginning. I love to sort of see, those photos from when someone started out, when they were super thin. And gradually over the months, maybe years, and you can see the fattening happening. And it was really interesting because for the first couple of years, he was just posting on Tumblr. And he was writing how he was feeling about getting fat. He was writing about the changes and the excitement. And it was such a great read. And at about halfway, after a couple of years, he then started using a paid platform.
Right.
And the tone of his Tumblr completely changed in that he was promoting himself. He's a commodity, so he has to promote. Once you've got a paid platform, you have to endlessly promote that. You have to constantly remind people. So it was almost like the way he was expressing himself so well about becoming fat in the first couple of years, there wasn't enough room for that once he got a paid platform.
But I find that feedback really interesting. And I think, similarly, again, with YouTube back in the day, you could have found anything you wanted on YouTube and it was there at the snap of the fingers. But if you want specific kink-related videos now, I mean, Tim and I have spoken about this, mpreg. Neither of us share that as a kink, but when we put up a poll to say if we were to start producing videos, what would people want to see? mpreg was dang near top of the list. And a lot of people who utilize different gainer forums will often get a lot of mpreg-related asks or comments, and a lot of people lash out a bit exasperatedly going, I'm not into this, leave me alone, because people are very much into it. But, it's interesting because it clearly means that stuff just isn't freely available anymore. You do have to go and find it. So,
yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, I think what it is, it's a balance. There are some guys that say they're on Grommr, they're gaining, they've got a paid platform, they remind you every now and then of that, but they also, they chat about how excited they are about if they've gained or whatever, like you get to know them a little bit. So it's a balance, and some guys are constantly reposting and promoting every single day. And to me, that's too much. We don't have to be reminded that much.
Mm.
That's all. It's just a balance. Go if you like, have a paid platform, but there's sell and reminding, and then it's just hard sell to the point of I'm not interested in you anymore.
When you use all of your spare time and energy to just loudly bellow, "Oh, everybody come and give me money for more." Like, why do I want more? The only thing you've given me is snippets. Like, where is the full thing? Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want me to invest, show me what I get for free. Give me a reason to go, oh, this is so good, I have to buy into it. Otherwise, why would I just of my own accord spend money? Because you're cute? No. First of all, you're not that cute. Second of all, there are a lot of cute gainers. Some of them are even my friends, and I will probably give them money first. So I don't know.
Well, that's one of the great things I think that's happened, and it's different to when I first hit the community, is that it's way more social. There are friendship groups, It used to be, as I said, secretive, and it was kind of just really like hookups, I guess. But now it's fantastic to see that it's quite social, and you see a group of guys having a pool party, or I don't know, just a pizza night or whatever, and there's several of them or a whole group of them, and it's a bunch of gainers, which I think is great.
I mean, even in the 20 years that I've been in the community, I've noticed that it's become far less clandestine than it used to be.
Yeah, I think the social side of things like Grommr and all of that, and there's been the bigger chub events for years, but generally I think it's definitely more social, and that's a fantastic thing.
No, totally. And I mean, as you may have seen on my Instagram and on Grommr, I now run the events in London. So when you're back in May, girl.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to have... Oh, by the way, is that perm or just visiting?
Oh, no, that'll be for a while.
Oh, yay. Oh, I'm excited. Oh. Yeah. But yes, so as you've seen, I've been doing events and stuff. And, it's interesting conversations that happen about events. I think a lot of people feel a certain type of way about meeting people. But I often wonder if a lot of that is just because they don't want to ruin the fantasy in their mind. Why are you so nervous to meet people? Because if you're the kind of person who needs time, then you know that about yourself. In which case, that's not really a conversation, is it? You'll just, of your own accord, take your time.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of fear.
I think there is a hell of a lot of fear. And it's interesting, every Grommr that I've either been to or the ones I've run, there are always people who it's their first one. And it's always amazing the feedback you hear when people go, I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad I took a chance and I just braved it and I've made new friends. Someone said to me recently, I think I'd be more comfortable going around someone's house, if there were events like that. And I said, those types of events you organize on your own. That's called a hookup. And you message people directly about that. It's not my responsibility to say, well, you're going to go hang out with him at his house, okay? No, that's fucking weird. Also, you want to talk about safety. The whole purpose of Grommr as events is that they're often free and in public places during the day. So, for instance, in spring, we're throwing a picnic in the park, which will be in the middle of the day, so there's no opportunity for any horrible business happening. It'll be bring your own food, so there'll be no one harboring any grief or guilt about that. And it'll be in a central public access zone. So it's not excluding anyone and their ability to access. It's purely just an opportunity to be social.
Yeah, I think I like the picnics. I think some of the best Grommr I've been to have been the picnics in the parks, just because it's cash. There's no kind of pressure.
I do want to ask. You mentioned this a little bit before. Some of the distance, let's say, between yourself and some younger members tends to be around sexual attraction. But on the opposite side of that coin, is there an expectation placed on you by different members of the community because of your age? So are you pursued as a daddy/granddaddy? Is that something that you experience a lot from younger members?
I do. Yep, definitely. And yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it? That gives me a lift. And I think that's just not only in the gainer community, that's just generally in the
Mm.
community. Some people are into older daddies and some are not. And yeah, I was saying to someone, as you get older, you are attractive to less people, but the niche group that is attracted to you, they're really attracted to you.
I was going to say, I have also experienced this and I am totally on board for it. Absolutely. If you want to objectify me and see me as the daddy type, you go right ahead. I am not going to argue with it.
But you know, it's the
Well, I
same with
think there's
gaming.
a thin line between objectifying and just finding someone really hot. You know, where
But
a man
either
finds
scenario
someone hot.
works for me. I don't mind being
Yeah,
objectified.
yeah. You got to read the room, you know,
Yeah, that too.
and it's. I've been attracted to people that are not attracted to me, and so I get the sense, and so I back off. You can't keep just like being like one of those little dogs that keeps biting you around the ankles.
It's called taking a hint.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
maybe people should be more direct. Maybe in the past I should have been more direct and been like, look, this just isn't going to happen. But I also have all of that sort of old school reasoning about, well, don't be rude to people, don't be mean, don't let whatever is in your head come blundering out of your mouth because it could hurt somebody. So
Oh,
find a
totally.
tactful way of, you know.
Yeah.
But then people complain about that and be like, well, you're being fake, you're being two-faced. No, I'm just being polite. I'm trying not to hurt your feelings. I don't want to
Mm.
destroy your
Yeah.
ego.
Another good
Well, we
reminder.
all know the kind of the consequences of rejection.
Yes.
And rejection can be come over a period of, you know, a long-term relationship and heartbroken, or it can be in a club on a
Mm.
dance floor. So, and none of us want to be the recipient of that, or you know, cause anyone any kind of hurt.
I
Oh,
mean, if
definitely.
anyone out there is really like thinking that rejection, in those situations, social, dance floor, bar scene, until you've experienced rejection at a bathhouse, which is a place where everybody is planning to have sex anyway, that I've experienced rejection at a bathhouse. Go through that, and then everything else will be just fine.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
Like, set yourself up in the sling, greased up, ready to be fisted, and have everybody walk past
yeah,
and just shake their head and go, no. Like,
been there for
that's.
7 hours.
But, you know, I think another good reminder there is sometimes no response is a response.
Oh, it is the new response. Absolutely.
It is
And
very
that's
much a
been,
response.
but that's because of social media. The new no is silence.
Hmm.
And I think that's even happening socially. You know, if you contact someone and say, hey, I'm going for drinks Friday night, blah, blah, and you don't hear from them, that's the new no.
Yeah, you've
Whereas
gotten your answer.
it used to be that you'd reply and say, can't make it.
No, totally. And I think to sum up that point on rejection, as much as we all fear rejection, I think if what you're looking to do is put yourself out there, you need to be prepared to be rejected.
Oh, yeah. And it goes back to my very first point. Just water off a duck's back. Don't worry. There are children starving in the world. Like, get over it.
If that one person doesn't want you,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
likely someone else. And don't we always talk about it? Like, what do they call it? Like, last call? Like, what do they call it? Crow's Corner or something like that? Where
Yeah.
it's at the end of the night and everyone who wasn't able to pick up is just like, as people are leaving the club, just like filtering through, like, bottom of the barrel, like, who's left, who's left,
Oh,
who's left.
that's a much nicer euphemism than what we tend to say over here.
Which is.
We say the ugly lights came on.
Oh, no.
Brilliant.
Oh,
And
my
I
God.
I would say, in answer to your question about is there an expectation? The only thing that probably pisses me off is there's sometimes an expectation of the sugar daddy thing.
Right,
I,
right.
I want to be fat. I want to be so fat that I don't have to work, and you can keep me and you know, look after me and care for me, and I can get as
Mhm.
fat as I want to be.
And you're saying here officially on the podcast that you're not into that. Is that correct, Tony?
I think it's a fantastic fantasy, and a lot of our kink is fantasy based. I think it's fantastic fantasy, but personally, and someone might want to do that for someone, but personally, I like to have the different parts of life ticking along: sexual, social, career. I think it's better to have them all going. So I would love to fatten someone to the point where it's, like very extreme. But I think, you have to have the other parts of life ticking along as well.
I'd agree with that. As a personal note, I'm also going to... I did draft you a Facebook message going to ask you to be my sugar daddy, so I will just delete that after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll buy you a drink.
There you go. That'll be it. So another interesting thing, a lot of gainers I've noticed seem to be into this sexual idea of aging. So like some guys will get laser hair removal to give themselves the sort of horseshoe receding hairline moment. And a lot of guys will shave their facial hair to give themselves those little dad mustaches, and like they'll wear like daggy clothes to make themselves look like the overfed barbecue beach dad type of situation.
How dare you read me like this? All except for the hairline.
Except for the hairline, which that's coming next. Tim has
no, it's not. No, I will. I don't care what I have to do. I'm not losing my hair.
My goodness. I'm just curious. Have you experienced this, Tony? Have people approached you about this? Have you seen it?
No. Well, maybe I have and not recognized it, and so off air you can tell me the ones that are doing this.
Oh, yes.
But I think it's probably just someone who wants to be a daddy and like they want it now. Rather than just letting it happen
naturally.
Which is where I found myself, because after I hit 30, and this wasn't just in the gainer community, this was in my gay community, people started referring to me as daddy, and I was like, but I'm only 30. Yeah. And then by 35, I was like, all right, I'm just going to lean into this because this seems to be the thing now, so why the hell not?
I mean, the moment I shaved my head the first time, I started getting the daddy motif, and now people just won't leave me alone. So I think I've opened the door, and my belly's too big, and I can't close it, I guess. So
you're in that room now.
I'm in the room with the other dads. That's me, dad with a chocolate addiction and a CPAP. That's me.
You'll fit right in.
Now, Tony, I do just want to objectify you deliberately here a little bit. You are quite a scrumdiddlyumptious human being. You take very excellent care of your body. You've got arms, shoulders, pecs, and all sorts. And when we do get to the end of the episode, we will ask you to give us the socials so people can go and see you for themselves. But, as an older person, you take really good care of yourself. How does your age contrast with your day-to-day engagements?
Oh, I'm not even sure if I know what you mean. How does my age contrast?
So, you take such good care of your body. Do you find that you're still doing that thing in Sydney where you're going out to the clubs and meeting up with, and mind you, this is all, let's presume, pre-COVID conversation, because obviously COVID makes it all a bit difficult. But do you find that you tend to live a younger lifestyle, let's say, as a result of taking such care of your body? Or does that not really factor in at all?
No, I think it does. Because if you're, my age, sitting in an armchair and not doing all that, I think probably what it comes down to is when you're a bit gym obsessed like me, and I always have been, I think it gives you an energy. I think it gives you a youthful energy. So you're right. Not that I'm necessarily a club person anymore, but just generally there's a youthfulness, I think. Yeah. And it's just pure energy from all of what you were talking about.
Doing all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have
I Of course, the irony is I want to be sitting beside a big blob.
Listen, that's why you're coming back to London. I'm going to be the big blob, which is gonna be hilarious. It's gonna be like you're not even 30 and you're so much more unfit than the old fart at 60 something. Look at him in the gym pumping away, and there's me with my ice cream, like yeah, he does that. Om nom nom.
Yeah, well, that's the contrast. Some of us are into contrast.
Do you remember there was that one time that we went to Nando's together and we were discussing what to get, and you said something about the half chicken? I said, fuck it, I'm going to go the whole chicken. And you went, oh, you reckon you can do the whole chicken? I said, yeah, go on. And I did.
You did. It was all over your fingers, if I remember.
Well, that's typical Nando's, isn't it? With the grease and the sauce.
Yeah.
I was sat there for a good,
I
20 minutes just...
I was impressed. I was very impressed. You did the whole chicken.
You are someone who, and I don't know what it is about you that produces or elicits this response in me, but you're someone who, when you give the compliment of, oh, good job, well done, there's very much that warm feeling inside of me, like, oh, I impressed him, I did the good thing, Tony's happy, I feel really good about this. And, to touch on your own gainer proclivities, because you are an encourager.
Yes.
So do you feel that an element of your own personal fitness leans or lends itself to the way that you encourage?
I think when you're built, it's easier to dominate.
Oh, yeah.
And I think probably the majority of gainers want to be controlled and dominated. I think that's a big part of the kink.
I will agree.
Not all, of course, but I would say it's a majority.
I'm definitely in that camp. I mean, there's something about the thought of like a big muscle dude who could just, not to say he'd beat the shit out of me, but it's definitely that sense of like, you better eat that food, fat boy, because you don't even need to say or else, because he's got those big muscly arms. Ooh, no, I better do the right thing and eat all this food. Gosh, that's definitely a chef's kiss.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common if you went through the profiles on Grommr of what people are into. I would say a dominant feeder is pretty common.
Pretty preferred. We do have a listener question for you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about one of your favorite gainer encounters, either when you were young and they were a lot older, or in more recent years with someone a lot younger?
Right. Well, when I was young, I didn't start being active in the community till I was in my mid-30s. But I am into younger guys, definitely. I guess to this day the encounter that meant most to me was a guy that I used to talk to in the States. And we communicated for a long time, and we finally met. We met in Miami, and we had a week together, and it was pretty damn amazing. And at the end of the day, I think it's because not only did we get on sexually with the whole feeding and encouraging, and he loved my body, I loved his body. So on a sexual level, it was fantastic. But on top of that, there was a fantastic emotional connection. It had the potential to be more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think that's what we want, isn't it? At the end of the day, we want to be sexually fulfilled, but we also want an emotional connection with someone who can care about us as well. It's like, yeah, on the lottery.
Definitely. And I do just kind of want to ask, as an older person, sage wisdom is sort of the thing that your generation is sort of well known for. I kind of want to ask, what would be your biggest piece of just advice for members of the community in general?
I think what I was saying before, absolutely go for it, but keep all those other parts of your life ticking over. Yeah. Social, career, family, turning yourself into the fat guy that you want to be won't solve all your problems of the other aspects of life kind
Right.
of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just one aspect.
Oh, totally. But here I was thinking, if I turn myself into a 200 kilo blob, that all my financial issues would sort of fuck off out
Yeah,
the
that's
window.
right.
No,
Exactly.
no, I don't think they will. No, no, I don't think they will.
Having said that, our kink, we love extreme. There is nothing hotter than those extreme thoughts.
Hmm.
And so, when I see young guys going for it, I think it's fantastic.
Tim, I kind of want to ask you because you are kind of that middle between Tony and myself. Tony's got some great advice. What do you think is the biggest challenge you've come to experience in the community during your time?
I think it was just finding my space in it and feeling comfortable with it, because I went online and discovered it about 17, and it wasn't until I was 34 that I decided to be open about it and start living my life in it, and that was a big hurdle to get over because I mean I've mentioned many times about my toxic marriage and the communities that I had been a part of over the years and how they had their own toxicity to impart on me. So it was definitely that. It was getting over my fear of, I guess, of being found out, honestly, because I think that's like the number one fear that most gainers have is that they're so afraid of being found out until it happens. And then no one cares, you know? Like I found no one has really cared at all. I'm still with my family, that's a completely different thing. I totally understand why people don't want their families to know.
Hmm.
But just being open and living in it, living your truth, living your best life, whatever cliche thing you want to say, that was my journey.
I get that. And I suppose my number one thing in experience, and this has been the thing that as a gainer has encouraged my growth the most, is actually looking after my mental health. As a young person, I went through a lot of trauma and didn't address it and just kind of thought gaining's always made me feel good, or at least the concept of, so I really want to push this and see where I get. But really spun my wheels for a number of years, made very little progress, and felt very, very poorly about it. But when I started to look after my mental health, and as you said, Tony, look at all the other areas of my life, family, finance, work, social, etc., it all started to fall into place. And I found that most of my gains have just come about naturally by way of, well, I happen to eat more now and I do enjoy overindulging and I've learned to cook more and I love to cook. So, of course, I cook bigger portions and put more butter in everything. And, it kind of evolves naturally from there. So I would say that's been my biggest thing is looking after your mental health and just making sure that you are, like you say, Tony, ticking along in all the relevant areas. But for a final question,
Yeah.
aging is a vanity thing in the wider gay and queer community. What advice do you have for people as they age? Because, as we said, you're someone who carries themselves with such confidence and such plum. It's really quite marvelous. How do you look after yourself as you age to come out much like yourself, full of life and full of all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think in the straight community, for straight people, their currency is their kids, you know? They talk about my little Sally and what she's doing and da, 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 da. That's their conversation. I think in the gay community, our currency is our looks. And therefore, if you're wanting to be fat, how does that fit in with the rest of the gay community? And if you want to make someone fat, how does that fit into the rest of the gay community? So I think, as you say, looking after your mental health, you've got to be at peace with this is what you want. And, fat proud or if I'm walking beside a fat guy down the street or at dinner with him, it took me a while. It didn't happen instantly, but now I bloody love it. I love being with a fat guy beside him, walking beside him. It just feels good. And that is not going to compromise my connections with my non-gainer friends.
Oh, I think that makes perfect sense. And Tim, as a sort of new inductee into the daddy barbecue, let's call it, what advice do you want to give to the gays who are younger than yourself?
Well, for one thing, stop being so self-obsessed, because there's a whole world out there that doesn't care how fabulous you think you are. And I, I know that might sound negative, but I know or have known a lot of very pompous people who were just way too into themselves. And I would also say, don't be afraid of your own aging process or your own mortality, because that's what it really is. It's people that are desperately, like my ex-husband, desperately clinging to what shreds of youth remain. And just, you don't have to do that. It's not necessary. And you can just sit back, relax, and life is a ride, and you should sit back and enjoy it.
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Tony, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. It was fun. Great to see your faces.
Good to see yours too, Gorge. Where can people find you online?
Instagram is McGill257. And then Grommr, Aussie Encourager.
Aussie Encourager. Tony, thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. As always, you can find me on Grommr, Instagram, and TikTok at stannnum, and Twitter and YouTube at stannnumg.
And you can find me on Grommr as Orpheus. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccymouse. And of course, you can find more of what we've talked about today on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Patreon at Thicc Radio. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.